Hello, good evening, Assalamu alaikum, and thank you for having me in your beautiful city. I always find it very uplifting to visit Vancouver, even if it's rainy and there's no sun. Which is not usually the case with me, by the way, but today was one of those days. Every story has a beginning, and a part of what I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to tell a story. But it's very difficult to go back to the real beginning, because then we'll be here for all the weekend together. And we will differ if we should start from 1967 or 1947, 48, 49, or if we should start from 1890 something, or where do we start? So I'm going to start with a specific point that is closer, which is 2010. I think that would help us manage our time a little bit better for the evening. In 2010, it was a year after caste-led, and there was a coordination work that had been going on between different initiatives in different countries to break the siege of Gaza, or challenge it at least, from the sea. There were successful trips to Gaza by sea earlier, up to 2008, but after that, Israel decided no more mercy, no more giving the chance even to small boats, and started confiscating boats that would try to break the blockade. So between 2009 and 2010, 6 initiatives or 5 initiatives got together with 6 boats. The most famous of them is the Mavi Marmara, the Turkish boat, and decided to up the effort and go together to break the blockade of Gaza, or challenge the blockade of Gaza. That evening, I was on my way to Ottawa to attend and help coordinate a demonstration the next morning against Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, who was visiting Ottawa. Listening to the news late at night, I heard that there were killings on the Mavi Marmara. And I said to myself, even Israel can't be that stupid to kill civilians unarmed on a boat that is carrying aid materials, that it had dealt with similar situations before by more self-control at least, and there is no reason for it to do that. And I said that is probably exaggerated reports coming out from the activists on the boat, and after all, as somebody who was sort of involved and know how these things happen, communications get cut, become intermittent and get cut before Israel attacks, because they create a communication blackout on the whole area where the boats are. So this information might not be true. And I fell asleep with that belief in my head. I woke up in the morning after a short sleep, and it was a fact that Israel had attacked the Mavi Marmara and the other ships, and it was a fact that the killings did happen. And more and more we knew, the more and more we realized that some of those killings were in cold blood, and that the whole operation was a brutal attempted show of force. A few hours later, Benjamin Netanyahu cut short his visit to Canada without any word of condemnation or accusation or blame from the Canadian government, and went back to Israel. And our demonstration in Ottawa that day turned from being a demonstration against Benjamin Netanyahu's visit to Canada to a demonstration to condemn what Israel had done and support the people of the Freedom Flotilla. But what's important here is that the media started asking, who are the Canadians that were on board of this Freedom Flotilla? What's the role of Canada in this Freedom Flotilla? And we came to know later the names of the three Canadians that were on the Mavi Marmara, one of whom is British Columbian Kevin Nish, and the other two actually are not. They split their time between Canada and outside Canada, so they don't have roots in the activist movement here. So basically, we can say that Canada did not participate, the Canadian civil society, did not participate in the first Freedom Flotilla in any meaningful manner. And at the same time, Canada as a government was participating in its support of Israel and continues to do so in a very meaningful manner. We don't differ that Canada is no huge military power. That is a fact. But when our Prime Minister sets the stage in 2006 during the invasion of Lebanon that Israel's response is a measured response, and when he sets the stage, being the first to act to cut all aid missions or relations with the Gaza Strip before Israel even does it in 2007. These actions set a responsibility on the Canadian civil society to be at least at the same level of condemning its own government and of taking a position supporting the rights of the Palestinian people to counter the shameful position our Canadian government is taking. And thus, on these days between May 31st and June 1st up to June 5th or 6th, many activists from across Canada, literally from coast to coast, started to talk to each other spontaneously. And all agreed, before agreeing on a project, before agreeing on any details, that the next flotilla has to have strong Canadian presence in it. And we have to be there, we have to be vocal, and we have to be clear that to ourselves and to the world and to the Palestinian society and the people of Gaza that we don't agree with the position our government is taking, and we are ready to work very hard to make it known to the world that this is our position. And very quickly, the Canadian Boat to Gaza as a concept was born among 40 or so people, normal Canadian people from Halifax to Victoria, that none of whom had real expertise in maritime work or in boats, we just had the will that we will have a boat that carries Canada's name in the next flotilla. Doesn't matter when that flotilla is going to sail. It doesn't matter how hard it takes us to be able to get that and put that in place. It's going to be done. And it was a learning curve. It was a very steep learning curve between the summer of 2010 and the summer of 2011. At the beginning, we were not sure how much this would even cost, and we started getting estimates for the cost. And when we realized that it's in the range of $300,000, we said we'd better find a partner to work with, because it's very difficult to raise that amount of money in a short period of time. So we got in contact with the American activists who we knew were also starting a similar project. And they said, we welcome Canada as a minor partner, but we're not going to be partners one-to-one because we have our project already in place. You collect what you can, and then you can give it to us, and we can take some of you with us on the boat. I mean, it was a typical American, in good faith. They're good friends of ours now. We will take them with us on our next boat. But that is really what happened. So we said that's not acceptable. We want Canadian presence. I mean, we're willing to have partnership, but we want clear Canadian presence. They had already named their boat the Audacity of Hope to challenge Barack Obama, and they were set in their ways. So we said we'll try to do our part, and we had confidence in the Canadian society that we're going to work, that everybody's going to work hard to get this happening. So it started with the Canadian civil society insistence to reach out in solidarity to the people, to the Palestinian civil society in Gaza. We managed in a few months to raise 50,000. None of us really remembers clearly how in another few months those under 100,000 rose all of a sudden to close to 300,000. It was really an act of faith that not only donations started coming, not only donations started coming that are not eligible to tax shelter, but also small communities from coast to coast were contacting us saying, we would like to hold a fundraiser for you and send you the money. Can you just send us some information about what you're doing? So it went really, all of a sudden, the movement grew. And all of a sudden, we would talk to the Americans and say, where are you at right now? And they would be ahead of us. And by the beginning of 2011, we realized we were ahead of them. And we got contacted by the other campaigns in Australia, in Belgium, in Denmark, and in Germany, who had small campaigns and wanted to participate, and asked us if they can give us some of the money they raised so that we take some of their passengers with us on our boat. And that really was another uplifting situation where it gave us a lot of faith that believe and try hard and be sincere, and things will start rolling. And come April, we had already put a down payment for the Tahrir. We had debated the name of the boat and debated it for a long time. And I mean, I was the only one of Egyptian origin in the group. And I guess people, and some of them are here in the room, and they can give their feedback. But I was one of the people who was against using a name that is foreign for the Canadian boat. But the convincing argument was that after the uprising, the revolution in Egypt, Tahrir is no more a foreign name. Tahrir is a name that belongs to the whole world. And I said, that really does make sense. I hope that the whole world sees it that way. But it had another advantage to call it the Tahrir, because our friends from Belgium, Denmark, Australia, and Germany, who each contributed roughly 7–8% of the total cost of the mission, also at this point felt ownership more than they would have if we had called it the Maple Leaf, for example. Or the Canuck. So it turned out quite well, and Freedom Flotilla 2 became a reality. 11 boats were, come late May, early June, 11 boats were there ready to, or most of them at least, ready to sail together in one flotilla, and only the nitty-gritty details were being discussed. This is, by the way, a banner that was created in a fundraiser in Montreal in one evening where people just spray painted around as they attended the fundraiser. And here the Tahrir was bought, repairs and modifications were done. It was ready in Crete waiting. The flotilla as a whole had its boats, the 11 boats, each in a separate port. 2 of them were in Turkey. The rest were in Greek ports, but different ports and different islands. And the delegates that were going on the boats bought their tickets and traveled to Greece, gathered in Agios Nicholas on the island of Crete. And I will single out one person for acknowledgement here at this point, which is Sandra Rush of Toronto, who, if it wasn't for her dedication and leaving all her life and going to spend close to 3 months in Greece to follow up on the purchase of the boat and the work it needed, and assuring that we have the captain and we have all what we need for the trip, this boat would not have existed. The discussions of, do we really need such a person to manage the project, or can we do it as volunteers from here, was a discussion that had to be had, and it was very difficult to take that decision, because we tend to ignore sometimes that we are running here a project that is close to $500,000 value. We cannot expect just to run it from home by phones, and no matter how much time individuals can put. It took the work of, in Canada alone, of over 40, 45 people to get this. Some of them really put their lives on hold to a certain extent to make the Canadian Boat to Gaza a reality. I can say much about this chapter of the Canadian Boat to Gaza in one way, and I can't in another way. I can say a lot about it because I was the one sitting at a desk in Montreal coordinating and following up everything from passenger list to coordination with other campaigns. I cannot say a lot because I was not there physically with my 30 close Canadian friends and the other 10, 15 from the other countries, and the journalists that were waiting and anxious to be let go to do what they traveled half the way across the world for. The flotilla as a whole started to prepare for its departure from Greece. They held a press conference in Athens with one representative from every boat. We chose, or the Canadian campaign chose, Bob Lovelace, who's an Arduk Algonquin native ex-chief, and the words he said there resonated with all the other delegates and with the journalists. As indigenous people, one of the things we learned about colonialism is that you never ask the oppressor for permission. And that was a direct response to the Greek government and to the Israeli government and to the Canadian government, all of whom were saying, obey the Israeli way of, or orders or direction of how to get aid material to Gaza. And the important point here, by the way, he's shown with Alice Walker of the color purple, who was also a delegate on the Audacity of Hope on the American boat. But Greece traditionally was, although it was one of the traditional strongest supporters, at least in the European context, of Palestinian rights, and the government in power was a theoretically left-leaning government, the surprise that happened was still shocking to all the organizers of all the boats of the flotilla. The first thing that happened before even before that press conference, is that 2 of the boats were sabotaged. The Sirsha, the Irish boat, was sabotaged in Turkey, and the Greek boat was sabotaged in Greece. And both boats were sabotaged by partial cutting in the shafts, and both were the same operation, very close to each other. If you look at the photos, and all that is available on the net. But the work continued, and the boats that were ready were still going to leave. Yet the depth of the Israeli bribing and arm twisting to the Greek government was something that we did not anticipate. The Greek organizers did not anticipate that at the end of the day, after exhausting all the bureaucratic reasons why they are preventing the boats from leaving, the Greek foreign minister issued an official decree that boats leaving for Gaza will not be allowed to leave the Greek ports, in conformance with, as he put it, with the position of the European Union. And that was really a strong blow to the flotilla, and more so to the people that were there waiting and extending their stay day after day, that after 2 weeks of waiting and trying, they get that reality as the final situation. The audacity of hope, despite that, the American boat tried to leave harbor, but was attacked or confronted by the Coast Guard right away, a few meters from shore, and brought back, and its captain was detained. On the Canadian boat, there was a steering committee from the core organizers. The decision was taken that this is a crucial point, and if the boat is to leave now, they need to have a strong agreement by all those who are on board, all 40-plus people who are on board. And a vote was taken, and all those on board agreed to make this illegal departure from Greece without the official okay from the Greek government. So on July 4th, Suha from Ottawa and Michael from Australia went kayaking and couldn't move very fast, so they were stuck in front of the Greek Coast Guard boat. At the same time, our captain was fired, who is Greek, so that he doesn't get any responsibility in front of the Greek government, and a few people on board who had some experience in driving boats took the helm. And the Canadian boat to Gaza moved out of Agios Nicholas, heading as fast as it could towards international waters. The Greek Coast Guard managed to catch up with it, and they managed to force it to return to Agios Nicholas. They arrested Michael and Suha, and they arrested Sandra Rush because the paperwork was in her name, and they spent a couple of days in Greek detention till they were released with a fine. At that point, it was clear that that phase of Freedom Flotilla 2, a chapter was closing at that point. And we had to regroup to decide what's next. What was learned from Greece is that despite the long history with Palestine, Greece is not currently a possible departure point for vessels challenging the blockades. And that a highly visible media campaign before departure makes it easier for Israel to outsource the blockade and have other countries do its enforcing. And that having international delegates and having strong media presence is really the strongest tool that we have to use.